Hey everybody, it's Eric here with Spartan, Autoworx, and GMFlash.com. Today I went to the shop and I was going to do a very in-depth video tutorial on how to do Fusebox and electrical repairs, in my opinion the proper way. I had two 8-1 trucks. One of ours is a shop truck that we're building and the other is a customer's truck, and both had some chewed up wiring in the Fusebox. Both of them had acorns. I don't think I've ever pulled one of these trucks apart that didn't have acorns in it. So I don't know what it is with the squirrels and mice, but for some reason they like these trucks and they like these fuse boxes specifically. So unfortunately, like I said, I'm not going to get to show you the in-depth version, but I figured I'd make a quick video here at the house on the proper repair procedure. So there's a couple different ways you can do these things. If you find that you have broken wires or stripped wires or eaten wires in your fuse box, I've seen so many people electrical tape up what's left, and you barely got one or two strands of wire holding on into the connector. Like that's just not a electrical tape around one wire is not a proper repair, and the system was never designed to operate with obviously one strand of wire. And you never know what some of that things go to. They could be carrying a pretty good load on it, so it's maybe a fire hazard in some aspects. So you definitely want to repair it properly. So here we have a fuse box, and it's going to be typical of your 99 up GM truck to 07. And this here is the front light connector that goes in one of these cavities. Believe that one right there. So if you find that you've isolated a harness that has chewed up wiring, it's pretty simple. Pop your fuse box open, find the harness and the connector that's affected. Get a 7mm bolt and then unplug your connector from the fuse box. So what I would do is find the affected wire. So let's just say it's this guy right here. You'll go and you'll take the lock pin out of the connector. You gotta excuse me doing this kind of with a camera in front of me. Don't really have a lot of room, so it makes it a little difficult sometimes. There we go. Got the lock out, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull the other lock out too. Alright, so both locks are out. We're going to go ahead and say it's this guy right here and remove this guy right here. So you come to the front of the connector. It's going to be this guy. If you have a small pry tool like this, works great. Also, they do make specialty terminal connector tools that I use quite frequently, but for this particular connector it's pretty simple to just use the pick tool. There's going to be a little gate here on the back, or a little lock. If you push down the lock, it will free it, and I'm going to try to do this carefully here. See if I can pull that out. Let's see, I've got it unlocked. Come back here. Proving more difficult than it really is. There we go. Alright, so now that guy's out. So let's just say that's our affected wire. So we'd come back into the pack, we'd clip these zip ties, come back and wherever it was affected, and say this would be the good point right here. So we cut it off and we'd have our little bit of strained wire or the broken wire to the terminal left. So you come back here, snip it, and then obviously you'd have to put in a piece of patch wire. The heavier gauge the better, obviously, but obviously you don't want to go overboard with it and get something that's 8 times its size. But a little bit, either the same size wire or a little bit thicker is always suggested. I'm a big fan of soldering connections together, but there's nothing wrong with butt connectors. It's more personal preference. I've heard many arguments both ways. I just like solder and heat shrink. So come back, add yourself a little pigtail. So obviously cut it, you'd solder or butt connector it, and you'd have your pigtail. So for the GMT-800 trucks, and I'm sure it's probably similar on the other vehicles too, and many other GM cars, for these fuse blocks, they use a MetroPack 280 terminal. And there's two different styles. Here's the two different styles. From the front, they're visibly the same. Like there's really no difference. You see that they have like a little opening spot and a little rounded spot. Hopefully you can see it in the photo or in the video. And then if you come to the back, there's two different backings. One is with a tang, which is the guy right here, and there's one that's tangless, which is right here. Now for this particular one, with the tang, you're going to find this in a lot of like the automotive connectors for lights, the actual like headlight connectors and stuff like that. For small connectors, that's what you're usually going to find the tang one for. Now you can make this work. These are probably more prevalent to go buy. You can make this work. You just have to cut a little bit of the tang off in the back just to give the lock a piece to seat or place the seat, or you can push this in and actually seat it in there like that and give the room for the lock to seat. Both work, but the preference is the tangless, so it's got an open back. Once you get your replacement terminal, here's a piece of wire. It's not the right gauge wire for this particular terminal, but you will have to crimp it in your terminal, or your pigtail piece of wire for your replacement in the terminal. Now they do make special crimp tools. This one here does do, I'd say, weather pack connectors okay, or not weather pack, but the Metro Pack connectors okay. It's not my preference. I actually have a specific tool for it, just not handy at the moment. But this does crimp these connectors just fine, and you can find these in any tool truck. Obviously has them. In many hardware stores you can find a particular crimping tool like this as well, and even specialty. We've got a couple special electronic stores here in St. Louis, and they have them. The terminal itself is like I said, Metro Pack 280 tangless terminal, and you can get these at the dealer too. Most dealers are kind of ignorant when it comes to the terminals. They're probably not going to want to help you. They do have tons and tons of clear plastic boxes, and pretty much you're going to have to get your parts guy to go through the boxes one by one and match up what you have. So if you've already cut yours off, you can take that and they can go box by box by box and figure it out. Like I said, most parts departments, every parts department I've ever dealt with, they kind of look at me like, you know, we deal with replacing harnesses, we don't deal with terminals. And I've gone in lots of bags that have never been opened. Some of the terminal boxes, I was the one that took the cellophane off of them to open them up. So you're gonna have a hard time, but they are available and every dealer stocks them. They probably have quite a few. Like I said, most don't use them. So anyway, you're gonna have to crimp this. You can either use I've used regular pliers before when I've been in a pinch, but you're gonna see it's got two parts. Parts are going to go to the strip part of the wire, which is going to be right here, and then you're going to have part that goes around the insulated part of the wire back here. You can kind of get a better close-up look there on the factory one. You can see how they kind of did it. Now this connector, or this terminal tool or crimp tool, isn't going to do the correct crimp, but it will work. So I'm just going to demonstrate it to you guys. So anyway, you're going to put it in there. You're going to set it. Put your wire in, crimp her down. This one's going to require 2 crimps for the actual strip gauge part. So that's nice and tight. It's not going anywhere. I have done some custom harnesses for a engine builder here locally that tests all his engines on engine stand. And what I did for the harness I built him, or the engine harness I built him, is I went and I soldered every single terminal to the wire to the terminal. You can heat this up and flow some solder in there, but you don't want to do too much because it'll affect the way it seats into the actual housing. But I did that because he's disconnecting those things all the time. I want to make sure it remained a solid connection. So you can also do that too if you have a loose crimp, or if you don't have the proper tool to make the crimp and it seems a little loose. You can also heat some solder in there, flow some solder in there, and it'll make it nice and tight and a real good connection. So for the back side of this tool is not the right tool, so we kind of got to make it happen here. Had to do this once or twice before. It's not very fun. I might be able to snake it in here and do a terminal crimp with it like that. Oh yeah, that actually worked fairly decently. So I was able to crimp it. It's not right. I mean, it's rounded, but it's not right because this isn't the right tool. But it works for this demonstration. I'm OCD, so it's really going to bother me, but it in a pinch this would work. So anyway, that would be the somewhat proper crimp to a Metro Pack 280 connector to put back into your fuse block. So after you get it, all you got to do is come back and find where it was going in. I believe it was right there, and you just need to find your alignment. So if you look, the the rounded part's going to be towards the bottom. So we'll put the rounded part towards the bottom and we'll stick it in there. Oh, it's already in and it's already locked, because the actual lock that goes into the back of the terminal, like we were talking about earlier, that'd be open in the back, is on the bottom, so it sticks inside there and keeps it from being pulled out. Then you've also got your locks that go through the side of the connector that actually hold them also from pulling out. So it's kind of a double lock system. So that'd be how to properly fix a fuse box connection the right way, by putting a new terminal and a new piece of wire and cutting cutting the affected area or stripped wire out or the burned wire out back to the good wire point. And you'll probably find that you probably got a handful of wires in every single one of these boxes that has some kind of issue. And if they're really bad, definitely where you've got a lot of wire exposed. If you got just a little nick in the wire, you can probably put some electrical tape on it, or the liquid electrical tape and be okay. But if you got exposed wires, cut it and put in, just go get yourself some of these terminals. They're like 20 cents a piece. Even if you don't have the proper crimping tool, you can use a pair of pliers and come in here and crimp down the sides and throw some solder on there, heat it up with a torch or a soldering iron, flow some solder in there, and it's going to be a nice and tight connection. But that's really the proper way to fix these broken wires in your fuse block. So, like I was saying, I had a guy come in this week too and had an issue with this particular connector. And actually, one of the wires that heated up in there and actually melted the connector. So, in something like this, these terminals, I'm sure, are going to be available at your dealer. You probably have a hard time finding them. So what you could do, and you could also do the same with a fuse block, if you go to the salvage yard or the pick and pull yards, go find, let's say you had an issue with this connector per se. You could go find this particular connector in a fuse block, cut this connector off and bring it back and use some of this wire and the terminal, since it's already terminated for you, and just cut it off, solder it to your other wire. You could even possibly match the colors up so it's, the colors are the same, and then you could do your fix that way. Same with these type of connectors. We got a couple different variations. I believe this is it's an AC Delco connector or Delco connector or Delphi connector. I'm sure these are too. I'll use this one here as an example because this is probably more common than what you'll see in general. So let's say you had a problem with one of these wires, which I actually worked on one of these today. This particular connector had 4 wires in it that were pretty much completely gone. So this one here is a real easy fix. Just kind of like that, you got to take the connector apart. There's 2 parts to this connector. You got a lock on the back or a wire guide in the back, so you can pop up on the locks, pull it off. Yeah, forgive me guys, I'm kind of doing this with the camera in the way. So pull off your lock, and you'll come to the front, and this cover is held on. You just pop in there, pop in there. You kind of just gotta work it out. Ain't nothing to it. There you go, it pops it out. So now that you have exposed the wiring, or the connector terminals, and this one here you can see he's got a little corrosion on that guy right there. If you look inside here, there's similar terminals as to what I showed you with the MetroPack 280s. I believe this is probably a MetroPack connector as well. You can see right there's a lock. So let's say I want to pull out, let's go with this green guy here, the second one here in the bottom. I'm going to, hopefully you can see this, I'm going to take the pick tool, I'm going to try to pry up on that lock, or at least slide, I can't even see it here, slide the pick tool over the lock, go to the back, pull out the terminal. So the terminal has a rubber grommet in it, or like kind of like a weather protector in it. So this one here might be a little more difficult for you to replace, and you can put these back together without these terminals or the rubber grommets or the weather seals. If you can just find the connector, you can skip this. You could put dielectric grease or some kind of RTV in the back if you really want to, but you really don't have to. But if you find yourself with let's say a connector like this or a connector like this, where one of the wires is broken and you don't, you can't cut it out and add a length to it, where it's, real short up here, just go to the junkyard, cut yourself off the appropriate connector with enough pigtail length, go back to your harness, you cut out the bad section, and then you can use one of these. And like if you have one out of the same style truck, then you can match up, your wire, do your repair, find your appropriate spot in the terminal that's missing there. Just got to make sure you line it up correctly for the correct orientation so it engages the lock. Push it back in. You'd put your wire guide on the back, and then put your cap back on the front, and there's your proper repair. Because if you don't give yourself a little bit of wire to play with here, let's say you had a piece of wire here off the original harness that was burned right here or cut right here or was exposed, and you cut this out and you shortened it up, put a butt connector in there, and you only got a little bit of wire coming off the connector side here, or the terminal side here to put it on. You're going to tighten that wire up, you're going to get some pulling and tugging on that wire. It's not going to hold in the connector, or you'll have stress on the joint or stress farther in the wire, and eventually it's not going to be a permanent repair. So always make sure you get either the correct terminal to make yourself like a pigtail like we did over here, or go to the junkyard, get yourself a cut off piece of wire with a connector, pull out the terminal, and then match up your wire colors if possible. Make your butt connector connection or solder connection for a good solid permanent repair that hopefully will last the lifetime of the truck. Hope this helps, guys. One of my pet peeves is poor wiring repairs. I think it's a lot of things people are scared of, and they try to do the home remedy just to get down the road. But for electrical problems, to try to chase stuff like that down, you're only doing yourself a disservice if you don't repair it correctly. And hopefully you guys out there that have problems with the fuse box, because they're notorious for chafing and animals getting in there and eating stuff, hopefully you guys found some good advice from this and gave you an idea of what to do to repair yours. And like we talked about earlier, if you don't feel comfortable doing a crimp on the connector, go to the junkyard, pull yourself some pigtails, depin them, cut them, slice them, solder them or butt connector them, put them back together, and your truck will be like good as new. Alright guys, if you need any other help or assistance, feel free to drop us an email at SpartanAutoworx.com or GMFlash.com, and we'll try to answer your questions. Like I said, hope you found this helpful, and everybody have a great day.